little bit about me. I have 2 sons. I'm quite young. I have a beautiful wife. I used to play poker online for full time, which was quite a fun experience. We can chat about this as well. And I went from business to software engineering. So I used to run family business together with my brother. I've learned a lot about how to think from a business perspective, but I found myself to be more passionate about building things and especially building software. So what will I talk about? I'll talk about 3 things. One is monorepo or microservices. Like, these 2 things have been floating around for ages. I don't think this has been solved yet, but like there are good rules to follow, like good practices. Then I'll chat a little bit more about my experience with dependency sharing, and finally tooling that's built around sharing dependencies, and more specifically maybe microservices that helps with microservices. So monorepo or microservices. I define monorepo as multiple related projects hosted in a single repository. That's like most of the things will be built around this definition. You can find different versions of that online, so don't care about them. This is how people usually think about monorepos. And by the way, this is my son, so this is how people approach monorepos, and that we are these monoliths, which is a bad thing, and there's plenty of stuff in there and everything's tangled. Also, in reality, it doesn't need to be the case. So Dan Luke from Microsoft did a way better job of explaining the benefits of monorepos than I could ever do. So I just shamelessly copied his ideas. So simplified organization, dependencies, and cross-project changes are 3 main things. So especially with cross-project changes is something that we've experienced at Nested a lot. In terms of organization, things living in one place, and you don't have to git clone and go to other places and figure out where do I have to open this, and who do I have to notify. This helps a lot as well. And finally, dependencies, you don't need to duplicate them. Everything's living in one place, and you just use those same dependencies wherever you need them. So that helps. That definitely helps out a lot. Some big names using monorepos. So Twitter, Google, and Facebook are famously the biggest ones. Nested is among the big names. Just put it in there. Microservices. So I define microservices as projects that each have their own repo. So repo per project or project per repo, however you like it. So Martin Fowler, who here has heard about Martin Fowler? Raise your hand. Yeah, a good bunch of you. So if you haven't heard about this guy, definitely subscribe to his blog, and anything that he writes is usually really good. He's a chief scientist at ThoughtWorks. And again, I've shamelessly stolen a bunch of his ideas, because I didn't want to focus on the monorepo versus microservices, because much more smarter people have talked about this a lot, so I don't want to just fool myself that I know more than them. So Martin Fowler, the main benefits of microservices is that they have strong module boundaries. So it's not with monorepo, it's very easy to couple code and import stuff from where you shouldn't import things. With microservices, you have to make network calls, so depend on them somehow, import packages and that sort of stuff. So it's not that easy to complex things. Independent deployment, so that's another good thing. So with monorepos, you have to deploy everything. You don't have to do this, but that's usually how it goes. You just deploy this one big thing with multiple services in one go. There's with microservices, you can get individual deployments, and there's a whole load of benefits that come with this flexibility of being able to deploy every single thing individually. And technology diversity is a big one. So with microservices, it's very easy to mix and match different technologies and pick the right tool for the job. So if you have some data work that you need to do, you'll probably choose Python for their extensive libraries and good calculation bits. There's for front end, you obviously want to have JavaScript, and for backend, depends on what backend you have. You want to be able to mix and match those technologies without having to worry about oh, how will this fit in this single repo. So different technology choices are usually the things that lead to microservices. So big names behind microservices: Amazon, eBay, and Spotify are the biggest ones, the most well known. Nested is also the big name that's using microservices. Yeah, and I'll chat about this a little bit more as to why did I put myself and Nested in both monorepo and microservices. So that's a thing that I'll talk about. So which architecture to use? And this is like this is how I look when I'm asked this question. So good thing is that Martin Fowler has talked about this and gave like really good general guidelines as to how do you approach this. And first thing is start with monorepo. Usually that's a natural way to progress. You just like build things as they come up, and you don't really have clearly defined project boundaries. You don't really know how do you want to split them. Unless you are using totally different technologies, like usually your choice should be just like put everything in one bucket, get it out as soon as possible, and test the idea if you're a startup. There may be circumstances when you don't want to do this, but like these are very specific, and usually if you have those circumstances, you know about them. So I don't want to give an escape hatch to people to say, oh yeah, but my circumstance is different. So monorepo is usually a good choice to begin with. And while using this monorepo, you'll figure out project boundaries. So you'll learn more about like what each of these services do and like how do they differ from each other, if they do or not. It will be much easier to like move things around, that sort of stuff. And finally, then you know, okay, this is like completely different thing. You feel the pain point of having a monorepo, and like you actually have a problem that this thing sits together with other things. This is when you want to like split it out and like peel it off and like nicely package into a different service and like branch off to like have a monorepo and like a single service and like maybe more services as you go. A good reason, like a natural way from monorepos, like a good reason to start with monorepos is that microservices incur a service premium. Again, another thing that Martin Fowler talked about. And basically, just by doing microservices and having different projects and that you have to manage, you incur microservice premium, which means that you have to manage, like there's more operation complexity in managing different projects and having to like deploy them separately. That is a benefit, but that also is a cost that you have to like deal and account for. And like with time, monorepos become more of a pain. So this is like where microservices come in, and this is like the whole premise of microservices is that you have these isolated projects that can like live independently and become easier to like reason about and deal with and work on. So my experience with like this was the conclusion of like how would you go about this argument. Like I support Martin Fowler in that start with a monorepo. Once you know exactly what you want to branch off and how do these projects differ, peel them off and like start doing microservices. So this is my experience with dependency sharing at Nested specifically. So I'll talk about two things. I'll talk about microservices, which right now is like two websites that you have on the two different domains, and monorepos, so like the Nest, which is an internal tools app, and backend services, which live in a monorepo right now. So when I started this, I was like quite young, and I really didn't know what's the better way to go. So I've just picked the cool thing, which microservices at the time was like the cool thing to do, and everybody did them. So like, oh yeah, we have to split those things. So I just went with microservices, and like I've decided we need to split this nested.com and app.nested.com because like we've talked that in the future these will be like two different things. So one will be a static site, and the other will be a more user-focused user portal. So like we've created two different repos, and like we've started bashing code and like writing these sites. So as soon as like we've started doing that, problems started happening. So a bunch of code needed to be shared between these two. So like all of the major building blocks like buttons, menu, different like styles for heading, all of that needed to be shared. That's cool, that's not a problem. I can like publish an npm package for that. So that's what we did. And now we have like an npm package to manage and like update versions there. Okay, but we can deal with that. Then we've built a nice library for ourselves to like deal with CMS calls. So like it's not even a library, like a couple of lines of code that help you wrap your components in a higher order component that fetches data from our headless CMS. So now that had to be reused between these two apps, and like, oh yeah, so now I need another npm package to like share these two things, because like app.nestle.com, we've never realized that we'll need the CMS, but turns out that for some pages, like a thank you page or like your evaluation report, we want to share these styles. So we want to share the CMS calls, we want to share content. And turns out that a lot of things we want to share between these two projects, although in the beginning we thought that these two will be like completely separate. And reality showed us that that was not the case. So even now we have these two projects. We have two extra npm packages that we have to like maintain, and every time we want to update them, like we have to update the package and like bump the versions. There's like a fifth sort of repo was born out of that, which was basically an archetype using a builder tool, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which basically was an attempt to simplify all of the tooling that is behind this. So like all of the testing frameworks like Jest, Babel configurations, ESLint configurations, we wanted to like share that. So now there's like this fifth package that we have to like maintain to like have a common tooling across all these like projects. Then when you think about it, this could have been a single repo with just like two build paths. Like the main reason, like when I think about this, like the main reason was that why we had these two different websites and the different domains was like I didn't really know how to build an app that would be served on two different domains from like a single repo, and like, oh yeah, let's do microservices. So that's not a good reason. Like this is an example of a bad reason. So don't do that. This is the Nest. This is the internal tools app. So this started as again as a separate project. However, in this case, this was like a good reason to separate this out because the boundary is very clearly defined. The nested website and the whole flow was totally different from the internal tools app. Like this was built for a different purpose. This is used by 50 or 60 people internally. So like we have a very short, small user base, and we can like, the requirements are completely different. We don't need to support all of the browsers. We just like have one browser and support that browser, and that's it. The styles need to be different because like the purpose of this whole platform is different. So like there's very little things, if any, that is shared, apart from maybe tooling. So I think this was a good choice to separate this out, and this is a good reason why you want to like start by branching these projects off, because like they have a completely different requirements. Another good use case when you want to like branch out early is like if you're in an agency, if you like work for two different companies, you don't want to like obviously keep their projects in a single repo, that sort of stuff. So by having this like single project, we've learned from our lessons. And the next thing, which is like the Nest, which is another internal tool. However, it's focused more on like selling properties. So the first one is focused on like getting the leads and actually helping the leads to progress with us and evaluating their property and giving a good valuation of their home. The second one is focused on like selling the properties that we sign. So basically, we want to like track the people that are coming through to us that want to see properties, and we want to help them out. So this one is sharing a lot of things with the other tool, like styles and a lot of common tooling that's built around this, like communication with our backend services. So we made a decision to like keep this as a monorepo, and even though that these two projects are different, they still live in the same repo and share a lot of things. And as like we'll have time to figure out the boundaries between these two projects and where does one stop and the other one start, once we have a much more clear idea as like how do they interact, if ever we have this, like then we can like make a decision to like split these projects off. And this is another one. So this is an Elixir umbrella. So this is our backend services, and like you can see a lot of different apps living in the same umbrella app, and all of them like could be considered as different projects, but it's much more easy for us to like keep them in a single repo. And like coincidentally, I've noticed even today when I made this screenshot is that we've moved things around in this monorepo, so it's very easy to actually like move things across projects. Even though like those projects are different and serve different purposes, we can move things around very easily in monorepos without like having to worry about, oh, how does this affect all these other services, and doing like rolling updates or something like that to just like make things not break things. So that's really useful and beneficial, and you can see this quite often in practice. Like as we grow, as we scale, and as we learn more about the projects that we build, we want to like shape them. And having a monorepo and everything in one place allows us to like move things around more freely without constraining ourselves within like arbitrarily set boundaries. So that was it. That's like my experience. I think monorepos is like, again, like reiterating on the first point, it's really good to start with monorepos and like figure out the boundaries and move on from there. So tooling, I've talked about 5 tools. I'll briefly cover them. The first 2 I wholeheartedly recommend. The other 3, I'll chat about them more a little bit later, and I'll share my experiences. So Imagex, think of Imagex as your single source of truth for images. So basically, you just upload all of your images in a bucket, in a folder, wherever you usually store them, and you use links to refer to those images. So your logo is always the same. Your icons are shared between different projects. You don't have to like have image processing in your build pipeline or anything like that. It gives you a lot of power with being able to modify images with query params. So if you haven't used Imagex or like an alternative tool, I definitely recommend you for you to try it out. And yeah, I couldn't imagine my life without it nowadays. Dependabot is another great one. So Dependabot, what it does is like similar to Greenkeeper, if anyone knows Greenkeeper, but effectively we keep your dependencies up to date by opening pull requests for you for every dependency that gets updated. So like they support a wide range of languages. In our particular use case, we needed Elixir and JavaScript, so like it supports those. And what it does, it like updates opens pull requests. And another feature that I like particularly like about it is that it can automatically merge dependency updates. So if you have good test coverage, which we do at Nested in some cases, not that good in the other cases, but like with good test coverage, you can actually not worry about dependency updates at all. So you can like select, I want to like automatically merge minor or patch updates and maybe like test more major versions. But like if major version breaks something, your test suite should be able to catch that if it's doing its job well. So wholeheartedly recommend Dependabot. Like it saves me a ton of time to not have to like care whether my dependencies are up to date and like opening pull requests for each separate one and like being able to revert them very nicely. Like it's a time saver. And by the way, it's also made by London-based guys, so like you can bang on their door if something's not working, and just like they're really good guys actually, so they help out a lot. We've had an issue that on each push to the repository, like when something changed, the Dependabot would rebase every single thing, and initially you'd get like 15 pull requests that need to like be merged if your dependencies are out of date. So effectively, like you'd get 15 new builds in your CI pipeline, which would clog the CI really heavily. And like I've opened an issue, and in that same day we've shipped a change that prevented that allowed you to disable the auto rebasing of this tool. So it's really useful. Builder. So this is what I've used to like create an archetype to share tools between different projects. So effectively, the first problem that I was trying to solve by introducing this was keeping the dependency up to date. We weren't using Dependabot then, and effectively, this is just like a separate NPM package that has all the dependencies in one place. So if you need to update a lot of dependencies, you'd update all of them in this one package, and you'd like just bump a version of a package in different projects. So this is one thing that it did quite well. With Dependabot, it kind of becomes redundant because like with good test coverage, you don't even need to care about like updating those dependencies, because like you have PRs and you can like do that manually, and usually that's like a very smooth process. So the other thing that Builder gives you is like some common scripts on your npm. So effectively, you can like do I don't know, npm run lint, npm run build, what else, tests. Like these are the main things that we've used it for, like free scripts. It seemed cool at the time. Now it's more of an overhead than a thing that I do. So like Builder solves most of the problems, and like hard coding free scripts in your package.json is not that hard, especially if you have like 4 projects. So if you have more, then it makes sense. Like The idea behind it was that Formidable Labs, they are an agency, so they build a lot of projects. So they sort of want to have a good baseline for all of these projects, and it makes sense for them because like they ship a lot of projects. For a startup or for a company that doesn't have that many projects, it doesn't really make that much sense. And there's another argument that could be made against like having this single tooling is you don't always need it. So like different projects move at different paces, and it depends at each project's pace as to like what tools does a project need to introduce. Updating, like doing major updates can be a headache, and you don't necessarily always want to do it all at the same time. So like there's a lot of arguments for just like going with plain old JSON, package the JSON, and not having this this extra thing in there. So that's Builder. So like I have mixed experiences about it. Definitely check it out if you work with microservices. It may be helpful for you. Depending on your circumstances. Lerner is another thing. I haven't used Lerner. I learned about it while I was looking to like solve that problem of like managing dependencies and shipping things more easily. The main purpose of Lerner was to help with open source projects which have a lot of small projects in them. So think Babel with all of the Babel plugins, or like Jest with all of the Jest plugins. It makes it easier for them to like make cross-project changes. And the thing that we have to do is like publish these as separate NPM packages because everything's plug and play. So in these sort of cases, it makes sense to have something like Lerner that helps out with that. I don't know how much help it would be with like having two different projects that don't really become packages and are just like regularly deployed. So if somebody used Lerner in more production-y way, have a chat with me. I'd be interested to learn more about it. And finally, meta is something that I've learned while prepping for this talk. It's this other thing that promises you to like not have to worry about microservices and monorepos, and you can just like have microservices, but work with them as if you had a monorepo. Seems like a too good to be true scenario to me. So if somebody worked with it or is looking to like enhance their microservices, just like check this out. It may be helpful for you. So yeah, an overview. Monorepo or microservices, start with monorepo and separate when you need. My experience, have a really good reason to start with microservices, like a really good reason, chat with other people. Don't make that decision alone, just like chat with as many people as you can, and usually you'll get a much better decision with when you make it with more people than had you made it alone. Because like in a lot of cases, especially for me, I just want to try new cool things, and that doesn't always mean good decisions. And tooling, use Imagex and Dependable, like use this, check it out. Like if there's one thing you're gonna take out from stock, use these two tools. And check out Builder, Lerner, and Meta if you are working with microservices extensively and you want to like get more help with like those things. So there will be all of the sources at the end of the slides, and I'll share those slides as well. So yeah, so all of the sources, you can check them out later, and all of the tools, like links to them as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening. And please give me feedback.